You are listening to the Intelligent Vocalist Podcast, episode 53.
Welcome to the Intelligent Vocalist with John Henny. This is the podcast dedicated to help you be a smarter, better, more informed singer. And now, your host for the Intelligent Vocalist, John Henny.
Hey, this is John Henny. Welcome back to another edition of the Intelligent Vocalist. You know, I really do have a great time doing these, and it affords me the opportunity to address certain issues that I see going on in the singing community, the voice teacher community, all these kind of let's argue about the voice communities. And singing terms are just a minefield of disagreements because they are ultimately inaccurate. We are using words to try and describe different aspects of singing. And the problem is no one word or term is really going to grab all aspects. And when I talk about aspects of singing, there is what the process of singing is like for the singer, what experiences the singer goes through, what sensations are created in the body when singing, a high note versus a low note. And a lot of the singing terms, and certainly some of the older singing terms before we had the benefit of vocal science to really break down what was happening, that's where these terms came from. They were really dealing with the singer's sensations. So terms such as chest voice, head voice, whoo, and the passaggio or passage between them, what's going on. There's this funny little feeling as you cross from one to the other. And so these terms were born. And now some of these terms are getting out of favor, or they've kind of morphed into subcategories like chest voice, your lower register, and then pulling chest. And that is a term that I use all the time. And I also know it's a term that drives voice teachers, some voice teachers, crazy. They can't stand it. And I understand why they can't stand it, because it's an imperfect term. So we have what's going on in the sensations of the singer, but then there is what is actually happening physiologically, what is happening within the muscles of the singer. All right? Within the vocal cords, you have a set of muscles. The two primary pairs of muscles that work for pitches, you have some muscles within the folds themselves. They'll be called the vocalis muscle or the TA, which is short for thyroid. But these muscles will shorten and thicken the folds. And then as you go to the high notes, you have these cord muscles that pull and stretch the vocal folds. And these are the cricothyroid or the CT muscles. And there is a shift over as you go to sing higher from the TA or the muscles that make the cords fat and thick, giving over to the CT or the muscles that pull and stretch. And so vocal terms will try and describe the differences. There's a different setting if you're singing a high note rather than a low note. And then there's also the acoustics of what happens. When you go from a high note to a low note, there is going to be a change in the interaction of your resonators, which are primarily your throat and your mouth. The sound is traveling through these resonators. This is, if your vocal cords are like a trumpet player's lips. The resonators are like a trumpet, and that's where the little buzz of the vocal folds are enhanced and built up, and certain aspects of the sound are made louder, and certain aspects of the initial signal from the vocal cords are made softer, and it gives not only color to the sound, but also vowels, your characteristic sound. There's a lot that goes on. So there's a shift in the acoustics, but then there's also a final shift, which is the sound. The sound will be different. Some people's voices, you can describe it as being brighter or warmer or darker or duller or harsh or metallic or warm or honey-like. I mean, there's all different ways to describe sound, and they are all woefully inadequate. Again, I'm sure I've said this before. and I'm totally paraphrasing, but to quote Frank Zappa, writing about music is like singing or dancing about architecture. So talking about singing is like dancing about architecture. It's pretty imperfect. However, we have to have a common agreement about what these terms mean when we're talking about different vocal issues. So here are some of the confusing vocal terms, why they're argued, why they're imperfect, and why they kind of work. So the first one we can talk about is chest voice, your lower register. And the reason that it's called chest voice, if you put your hand on your upper chest and just say, you'll feel it vibrate there. There's a couple of reasons. Your vocal folds are fatter and thicker when you are in your lower register, for lack of a better term. And so they give a little more biofeedback. You're going to sense it a little more. There's more contact with the vocal folds, if you will. Also, in terms of the resonators, you're going to get a little bit more of a boost that's associated with the throat resonator rather than the mouth resonator. Now, this will change for certain notes and certain styles of singing or sounds of singing. But in chest voice, you're primarily, it's fatter, thicker chords, and you're getting more resonance in the throat area. Now, we could say that we are in a TA dominant condition with the first formant on the third harmonic. Yeah, that's chest voice, but that's not how people talk. Now, maybe within the voice teacher world, we'll start talking more in terms of that, and there's more of a move towards science-driven voice teaching, which I'm a big cheerleader for. However, when you're talking to singers, that's not going to make any sense. And so we have to have terms that make sense to the layperson as well. Now, chest voice is a very, very old term. And then you get its counterpart, which is pulled chest. What the heck is pulled chest? Now it's really starting to sound like nonsense. And I understand where voice teachers go, pulled chest is ridiculous. Why would you? It makes no sense. However, you got to look at what it's referring to. So as you begin to ascend, your chest voice starts to run out of road, if you will. It starts to hit a place in your range where the conditions of your chest voice no longer work optimally. Either you're using too much vocal fold, so you're not going to get up to pitch, or it's going to start to use too much muscle. Or acoustically, you are getting into a condition where this throat resonator is aligning with a part of the sound wave that's no longer optimal. And you'll see singers, they all make the same face. Their larynx or their Adam's apple starts to come up, and they raise their chin and they start spreading their mouth really wide because they're trying to keep this condition. Now, there are ways to take this condition higher than normal. For stylistic reasons, although you do have to make some modifications then in the amount of muscle you're using at the fold. So some people will call pulled chest, they'll say that's a problem where it's actually an artistic choice of the singer. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when somebody's like really yelling, and they're just really, really straining. And so you have the condition of probably too much TA versus CT, so too much of the muscle within the vocal fold versus too much of the muscle that's stretching and thinning. And also acoustically, you probably have a setting of the sound wave resonator interaction that is not going to work. So what does it sound like? It sounds like shouting. What do a number of voice teachers, including myself, feel free to throw things at your phone or your listening device if you disagree with me. I'm totally cool with it and I get it. But pulled chest is describing that chest register taken too far. It is essentially pulled out of where it functions best. And you're trying to stretch it further than you should in a suboptimal way. I'm saying optimal a lot, but it makes me feel smart when I say it. In a not so great way. so that you're essentially shouting. There are other terms I've heard, register violation. I like that one. It makes me feel like we should get a ticket. Oh, I just got ticketed for register violation. But registration is really trying to figure out, what part of the voice that we're in. And so what we want to do is we move out of this pulled chest. We don't want pulled chest. As we move out of chest voice, well, now we come to an area that gets even trickier because we need to physically move from the chords being short and fat to a bit longer and thinner, but not so much so that they go all the way over and get too thinned out. We still need enough contact. So there's this interplay of the muscle. That's what's happening physically. Acoustically, there is a shift in the interaction of the sound wave to your resonators, and the mouth will become a little more dominant, or the acoustic boost that's a little more associated with the mouth begins to become stronger. I'm not going to delve into that too much here, but as you shift muscle and also the acoustic resonator load, or what's providing more of the energy, there is a shift in sensation. And it feels like you've entered, people will say, another room, or it's like the sound is beginning to travel back behind my eyes. It's like I'm going through a passageway or a passaggio. All right? That is the old singing term. Now, there is debate as to whether this is essentially just now you have entered into another register, or if this functions as its own register. I call this area mix. Totally misunderstood term, or at least an argued term. I often see mix referred to by people as just kind of this lighter style of singing. But I believe that you can belt really, really hard into a mixed condition. But what is mix? Well, that's an imperfect term. I've explained it on another podcast, but even then, I don't have the final definition. And I sit on the board of a teacher organization called International Voice Teachers of Mix, and yet mix is argued. So this transition, though, does happen at some point. If you keep going high enough, you can delay this transition. Most people, when they delay the transition, they do it poorly. There are skilled singers that can delay the transition skillfully. The sound can be a little intense, a little wide, but stylistically, it can absolutely be called for. I like singers to be able to master this area because I find it has most of the singing problems there, as we do not only the physical shift, but the acoustic shift over. The sound itself begins to change. So there's a different sound as well. When it's delayed, the sound will be a little brighter, a little more in your face, a little more yell-like. When it goes more into what I consider a good, healthy mix, it becomes a little ringier and a little warmer. When it goes too far into that too soon, it will become maybe a little over dark or a little weak. Now, you can also talk about modes, and they will talk about the lower register being M1, mode 1, and then as you go into the upper register, it becomes mode 2. Now, this is kind of cool because the mode 1 or mode 2, just like thing 1 and thing 2, but it's not a specific name. We're not describing a sensation. We're not describing a shift in perceived sound. We're just describing a mode. And then within that mode, then we can say, well, what's in that mode? Well, that mode is more TA dominant with the first formant on the whatever harmonic, and rather than the descriptive terms. But I don't know if that's really going to catch on with the general singing public, people who are just starting to sing or casually singing. I think some of these old terms really do work. The problem is getting an agreement on their meaning. So moving to these modes to describe singing registration, I think ultimately is better. I just don't know if it's going to perfectly catch on. Once you go through this passaggio or mix, you go into head register. So named because, woo, you feel that more in your head. However, there are different definitions of head. And head voice for a male singer versus a female opera singer are going to be a little different. The tuning is a little different. Acoustically, the muscles being used are a little different in terms of there's a little more intensity of contact of the folds with the male singer. There can be a debate on what actually constitutes head voice versus falsetto. All of these terms are, again, imperfect. And then you will get other schools of voice that will begin to talk about modes within the registers and create like different terms for modes and colors and intensity and all of these things. And I am cool with all of that stuff. I don't argue any of it. Here's what I think, though, is when you are seeing something, let's say that you've watched a YouTube video and it talks about mix. And then you watch another YouTube video and a teacher is just going on and on about how mix doesn't exist. There's no such thing as mix. We kind of have to look at the next level down of what each video is talking about. They may be talking about the same thing. They're just arguing the semantics. And they may be talking about the same thing in a slightly different way. Somebody may be talking about extending the chest, whereas they're keeping a little more of the acoustic tuning of chest, but they're making muscular adjustments. And so that's a little more of an intense sound. It's a wider sound. And another teacher may say, well, that's pulled chest, but it's not unhealthy, but here's mix. Well, wait, if that pulled chest is not unhealthy, then we can't categorize pulled chest as bad. You know, what is good or bad? To me, the only thing that's truly bad in singing is if you are hurting yourself. And even then, sometimes you gotta be a little naughty with your voice. The perfect example is John Lennon doing Twist and Shout. See, I got a Beatles shirt on. I'm just showing people on the YouTube Live. You podcast listeners cannot hear it, see it. But I got a really cool Beatles shirt on. But anyway, when John Lennon did Twist and Shout, he was sick that day, and they saved that song to the end of the recording session, and he screamed out that classic rock and roll vocal and then was hoarse afterwards. However, as a voice teacher, I'd go, no, that probably wasn't a good idea. But you know what? As a fan of music, I'd go, hell yeah, that was a great idea because now that is captured forever. So, you know, right or wrong in singing, that's not an area that I'm really comfortable fighting in because I think just about everything can be justified if you're doing it on purpose, if there's a musical reason. But yeah, we do get into these arguments. I've certainly used singing terms and then seen people comment on it and they kind of lose their minds. And actually, I'm fine with that. I understand it. The only thing I'd say is maybe just look a level deeper beyond the term. I acknowledge that all the terms that I use are imperfect, but I'll continue to use my imperfect terms while I attempt to explain what it is I really mean. So when you're traversing the world of singing and learning to sing and all these different terms, understanding what's really going on will help you make sense of all this and make sense of the arguments. Again, if you've ever wanted to study vocal science, not in a really, really deep way, but just to understand a little bit, I think can be really, really helpful. If you understand what's going on physically, but then also the acoustics, and if that makes sense to you, you can have a much easier time of navigating this area. That's why one of the reasons I do this podcast, and I do the things on resonance and acoustics and how vowels work and all that, which hopefully is really helpful. Hey, I thank you so much for listening. I could babble on about this subject for quite a while, but I think you get the idea. Just a little plug here for myself. My Contemporary Voice Teacher Academy is now open. And you can go to johnhenny.com and on the menu, just click on Teacher Training and it will take you to the page that will explain the course where you can sign up. It's $49 a month, and this course goes from really in depth. Even if you've never taught a voice lesson, but you've been thinking about it, it will walk you through all the steps to become a solid voice teacher. And you can take a test, and it will, if you pass, you get your certificate. It's for your teaching studio. I'm pretty proud of it. I had done a previous course called Voice Teacher Bootcamp, and I learned a lot from doing that. And so I actually closed that course, completely redid everything, and now I have Contemporary Voice Teacher Academy. So if you're a singer that's ever thought about teaching voice, go check it out. If you are already teaching voice but want a little more contemporary teaching skills in your tool set, I think it'll work for you as well. It's $49 a month, and if after the 30 days, in the first 30 days, you don't really dig the course, just let us know and we'll give you your money back. I just want people happy. We'll stay friends. It's totally cool. It's actually done pretty well. I've had a lot of beta testers through it. They're really, really enjoying it. So if you want to check it out, johnhenny.com, and then at the menu, just click Teacher Training. And until next time, to better singing. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.